6 p.m. on the 11th of July. This will begin the Buckley City Council study session. It should have been last week, but we had a little issue in the building, so we're going to have it today. So your agenda says the 4th, but we're doing it today. Starting off.
Hey, Meg.
Davis or
The city council agenda.
I just thought of it and then I put there because I didn't.
Oh, there's a bunch of changes in
Yeah.
Keep eating my cheese.
here. Okay.
What's that?
So I'll just keep eating my cheese. Crunching in the microphone.
Crunch right in the microphone.
I'm trying to get.
For those listening, we had a technical difficulty. It is the 11th of June. It is now 8:01 p.m. We'll try this again to start
8:01.
6:02
That's probably one.
p.m. now. And we'd like to start the Buckley City Council study session. First topic is property maintenance code review.
So this is a proposed revision that amends our code, which currently references the 1997 Property Maintenance Code and updates it to, your packet said 2018. It will actually be the 2021 edition. In March of this year, we were required to adopt now the 2021 code. So what this does is it accomplishes us being able to have more proactive code enforcement. Right now, our code enforcement, when we have a property code violation, consists of an initial letter and outreach. Afterwards, if they don't come into compliance, we can issue a citation, but we don't really have a means in dire situations where we could go in ourselves to clean up the property or take action. And that is something that we're able to do in RCW. So what this does is it takes that RCW and it puts us into our own code. So in extreme situations, which I tried to give some examples in the memo, we would be able to step in if that was necessary. If it was determined to be necessary, we would again start with voluntary compliance always. So they would receive a letter from a member of our team. Afterwards, they would have a certain amount of time to come into compliance. We give them an opportunity to come up with a plan to achieve compliance. If they were not responsive to that plan, we could move forward with issuing an abatement order, which would basically say, if you don't clean up the property or fix this issue, then the city will step in and do it on your behalf. If they continue to not be compliant, that would go to a public hearing in front of the hearing examiner, and the hearing examiner would determine if the city was right in its findings that this is a nuisance property that needs to be abated, which means that it's a threat to public safety. So at that point, again, they're given a certain amount of time to come into voluntary compliance and do it themselves, or we can hire a third-party company to come in on the city's behalf and demolish or clean up the property and or structure. That costs obviously some dollars. So right now we do not have any funds set aside to be able to start an abatement program. So that would be something that we'd be looking to do at the next, either in our next biennium, or if there was an emergency between now and then, we'd be coming to you to ask for some dollars to set aside to potentially move forward with an abatement. And we would place a lien on the property. Other cities that do this, there's a lien on the property typically in these types of instances where you have a property owner that's ignored us and ignored all requests. We wouldn't recover those costs until the property sells. So it would be some upfront cost that we wouldn't likely recover for a period of time until the property sells, but we would eventually. So that would be our revised process. Any questions?
Councilmember Burbank.
How often has it happened that you know of the city having to send I'm just looking at like these examples, like how often?
Not often, but we do have one instance right now
Okay.
that we've encountered where we're not getting compliance, and we would like to have a little bit more teeth beyond
Got it. Okay.
having a civil penalty.
Okay.
Other questions from council?
Can you go over the civil penalties as far as cost?
Right now, the civil penalty is $500 per day per infraction, up to $500 per day per infraction.
Any other questions?
So for next steps, this will be coming as a revised ordinance. It requires a second review. It does not require public hearing to adopt. So we'll come to you with a second review and then tentative action.
Moving on to essential public facilities draft code.
Another proposed code amendment, you have a revised version of this on each of your seats or table spots. Since the study session, actually, we have been able to sit down with the school district and they provided some really helpful feedback. We also did an evaluation based off of a meeting that we had with the planning commission. And so we made some amendments based off of that feedback. This code is in response to a mandate under the Growth Management Act that we have criteria for citing essential public facilities. Right now, we have a public zone that has certain allowed uses or prohibited uses in it, but no actual citing criteria that connects the Growth Management Act and laws in the state of Washington and the countywide planning policies to the city of Buckley's code. So if there was to be a new proposed essential public facility coming into the city, there would be no requirement necessarily that they receive any approval from the city outside of building permits and site plan permits. So what this does is it creates that criteria for us to have oversight and overview of future siting of essential public facilities. This is especially important because of the amount of land that we have that is state owned and the fact that there's been some changes at the Rainier State School. And in anticipation, members of our team have been part of some stakeholder meetings where they've discussed possibly changing the use at that facility. And we want to make sure that we're included in those conversations. So looking at the changes from what was originally proposed to what you have in front of you today, originally we were looking to exempt, they're called secure community transition facilities, which are exempt under citing criteria in some instances under RCW. However, I found several cities that do in fact impose citing criteria that's allowed under RCW, and I have placed them into this code and removed that exemption. So it's secure community transition facilities, which are for those who are looking for additional less restrictive alternatives to prison that have been convicted of sexual offenses. With that, there is a certain amount of space, 600 feet, that they have to be located from a slew of different uses. And so before one were to be proposed to be located in Buckley, this would require that they come to us first and confirm that they could even be located here at all. We will work on getting a GIS map essentially when we look at all of these different uses, putting a bubble of 600 feet to see where those pockets may be. But you can see it's a pretty extensive list, and I think it would be difficult to find a spot for one of those to be located here. The next amendment redefines what was originally spelled out for the types of essential public facilities. Old code had kind of a catch-all phrasing under growth management that essential public facility is anything that is quote unquote hard to cite. As we've evolved in terms of low income housing, some cities have found themselves arguing whether or not different types of low income housing are essential public facilities, which would give them a higher priority to be placed into areas that they would not otherwise typically be placed into. So we removed that general broad language and specifically actually said that it does not include the catch-all of those facilities that are difficult to cite, and instead are those facilities that are defined on the next page. Local essential, meaning owned, operated, or sponsored by the city of Buckley, a special purpose district, or another unit of local government like the school district. A state essential public facility, which would be owned, operated, or sponsored by the state of Washington, and a regional essential public facility, which would be owned, operated, sponsored by a federal agency within the city limits. So moving forward, we would require that any local essential public facility go through our conditional use permitting process, and any federal or state essential public facility would go through a development agreement or a conditional use permit, as well as, depending on the size of the campus, anything over 20 acres, which includes Rainier State School, would be required to have what's called a master plan, where they come to us with their plan for the future. And we have a public hearing to review that plan. And then anything that they propose needs to comply with that plan, or it has to go through the same process of the master plan. And it streamlines their permitting, so it's beneficial to them and it's beneficial to us because we make sure all of our needs are met through that planning process and public engagement. Any questions?
I'll start off with a comment that when we were talking about on page 1 of the memo, how this affects the secure community transition facilities. If you remember, in the last year, there was a big public outcry out by Cooper's Corner in southeast King County and in Tenino, where the community was able to effectively push back, but I don't think they would have had the protections of this type of code amendment. They had to do it in another way. So this is forward thinking, very much so. Questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on to Jefferson Street.
Most of you remember in the fourth quarter of 2022, there was some discussion and actually action over vacating the Jefferson Avenue between River and 410, where the new parking lot is. And we went through the public hearing, we went through the process, and it was decided not to vacate Jefferson. Part of that conversation included some options in closing Jefferson's either seasonally or, basically remain doing what we've been doing for the last couple of years and just closing Jefferson on Thursday evenings for the music in the parks. So really what we're looking for is some guidance from you on to which route we want to do. The seasonal closure that was talked about was Memorial Day through Labor Day, which would leave Jefferson closed through that whole duration of time. Otherwise, we would continue on just closing it on Thursday evenings, Thursday all day, excuse me.
And we had this conversation, and I remember we had a public hearing and we heard from a very small sliver of Buckley, but they were overwhelmingly wanted to keep that open and not permanently vacate. So that's why we didn't go down that road. But as Director Banks said, only Thursdays, but we don't know if there's going to be something else. We know there are tunes in the park or tunes on the trail or Thursdays, but there could be other things. Other things, once, we got the pickleball / basketball court there, they could have a tournament type thing. Our parking lot is across from the Jefferson Street. I think we need flexibility and not to just be Thursdays, but we have the seasonal option, but I don't think that's going to please too many people. But I think we need full flexibility from any event that the city knows about to be able to close that while it's on that space. Councilmember O'Shannell.
Well, with the new parking lot, if we close it all summer long, and nobody use the parking lot then? Or would you close?
With a full closure? No, we'd close it on the west side of the trail. So you'd still be able to come in off Highway 410 and access the parking lot and then leave and take a right only out of there. So it'd be from, the west side of the trail to River Ave.
Councilmember Bender.
Okay, I'm totally against closing it at all. Because number one, what happened on the fix on Main Street really messed up traffic flow. So we need that extra street. And if it's for the reasoning behind Tunes on the Trail or whatever, that would be there on Thursdays, then maybe you need to close River too. Because there's kids coming from River, from the parking lot from there. So that doesn't make any sense, just to pick on Jefferson. Jefferson's getting a lot more traffic. And like Chris said, they'd have to turn off of 410 onto Jefferson to get to the parking lot. Well, making a left-hand turn there is a little dangerous because there's the street. I mean, they're going to back up traffic. Somebody's going to get in an accident. So just leave Jefferson alone. I don't see where there's going to be any issue. Most of the little kids are going to be further away over in the tot lot area. And I don't see closing it at all, costing the city extra money for closing them on Thursdays. Like I say, with the traffic jam, they're now on Main Street because only 2 cars can get in the left-hand lane. And if you've got several that want to turn left, you're now blocking anybody going straight or right. So they're going to find other avenues, in which they have done during when Main was closed. So unless you're looking at closing River at that same time, because of all the people and the kids that go to the whatever's going on, the music in the park or whatever, it's not going to make any difference with Jefferson. None whatsoever.
Councilmember Anderson.
Can you remind me where they put the stage for the Tunes by the trail?
It is on the south side of the sidewalk on the north side of River, so
So
it's tight. It's right,
butts
it's right up to the
Jefferson.
road. Yep.
Okay, then I disagree that kids wouldn't be over there. That definitely would be a hazard. So those are just my thoughts right
Well,
now.
there'd also be a hazard because it's right on the corner of River. So are you going to close part of River off for that event too? I mean, if you're looking for pure safety, they know both need to be closed during the event.
Councilmember Green.
Are there any other events happening besides the Thursday events coming up?
You got it?
None have been scheduled
Yeah,
right now,
none.
Okay,
but I wouldn't say that none may be scheduled. We do see even now special event permit applications coming in for the summer to close Main Street. So I think that it's certainly a possibility. I would want to say what we know is that we have a regular Tuesday event. Previously closed Main Street for because of the location of the stage and
Yes.
how that's being used for the event and parking, or not parking, sorry, seating.
gotcha. Okay. I mean, yeah, I kind of agree with what Councilmember Smith was saying. Like if there's like Thursday, that makes sense to me, like close it down. You got little kids there and all kinds of activities. But if there's other times, like to leave the language of whatever we do open up so we can close it at other times too. And so it's not just stuck to Thursdays, but anytime you have some kind of event there that can cause more foot traffic and more hazards. Have we had any incidents there with like just the regular foot traffic? Like any close calls or anything? Okay,
However, we did have a young person hit on Main Street here last year or maybe the year before at the trail crossing. The trail crossing is on Jefferson. River is an arterial that runs north and south. We're talking about trail crossings. And in the future, you're gonna have the Doc Tate Pavilion, which is, it's not here yet. I get that, but that's gonna amp up activity. And that's why we have the parking lot, because we're gonna tie in all this hub of activity. Talking trail crossings, not arterials in the area, because 410's all, if we're gonna close River, we need to petition the state to stop 410 as well. If that was the analogy. Councilmember Burbank.
How much are we looking at, what are we looking at cost wise if we have somebody close it on Thursdays? Like, what is it gonna cost the city for overtime to put signs up?
For our own events,
Yes, just for the 7 Thursdays that we have.
they will be
7
set
days.
up so essentially nothing.
Okay,
They'll be set up during the workday on Thursdays,
and then
and then the workers that are at the event,
we'll just take. them
we'll
out.
just slide them out of the road.
For myself, I would just be in favor of closing it on just the Thursdays because I see more kids there at the 11 o'clock time where there's all the shows. And yes, River Road is there too, but the main, that's, I would say for safety reasons, 7 Thursdays isn't going to kill people to have to go around when they know it's already scheduled out. That's just my opinion.
Other comments? Mayor?
What time Thursday would it start? Do we know roughly? I mean,
Typically, it seems like it's around 10 or 11. Yeah. But
Okay.
We set up before.
So
Okay.
we probably close the street, close to the start of the workday.
Okay.
And we then have to set up the stage. Or no, the stage.
Stage,
stays there.
the stage stays
So it
there.
would
Yeah.
just be, so we would probably
So,
close it a little, yeah.
like
8.
9, 10 in the morning,
Okay.
somewhere in there.
9, 10 to, and we could post that if we decide on a time from, say, for argument's sake, from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. or whatever that looks, or 10 to 10 or whatever that looks like, and then people can
There are
adjust
some
accordingly.
people that sometimes attend at 11 o'clock and they get there early, so it
Sure.
would probably be closer to 9. But we would want to see it close to 8 or 9.
And what time does it wrap up?
The
7-ish?
last concert's at 6, it
Yeah.
starts at 6,
I-
so it's over at 7, 8 o'clock.
8, I would say 9 to be safe.
Yeah, 9 to 9 then,
Yeah.
something like that. Okay.
Councilmember Burgess.
I think that if we just close it when there's an event, whether it's on a Thursday or an, additional, oh my, we're gonna do something on a Tuesday, I think just for the safety, because it is, if it's well attended, I would rather close the road for the one day rather than have anybody get hurt. But I would not support a seasonal closing. That's my opinion on that.
And this would just be on this side of the trail. The parking lot would still be accessible.
Yep,
to-
yep, we'd close it on the west side of the trail.
Any other comments or questions? So, well, obviously we don't take votes here, but what I hear is the majority of the council supports it closed on a day of an event. Right now, it's only Thursdays. Roughly 9 to 9. And the parking lot will be open off of 410. Out of there back to 410.
That's the direction we can.
Yep. Yep.
No seasonal closure.
Moving on, comp plan. Update.
All right, comp plan, we've moved through this pretty quickly, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time than I had originally planned for the comp plan. Specifically, when we look at the land use and community design, we've had a lot of conversations about what we would like to potentially incentivize and a little bit of conversation about what we don't want to necessarily see on 410. And I wanted to just open up the conversation for feedback because as we put this in for the economic development chapter, I want to make sure that I have a full list of those business types that you'd like to incentivize and anything that you would like to not incentivize and or possibly prohibit along 410. So with that, I invite just for land use and then we'll jump into economic development, capital facilities.
Anybody want to jump on this? I'll just say, today I saw something on that thing called Facebook. People screaming and yelling about McDonald's and because they broke ground and I want to see a steakhouse and I want to, Trader Joe's was one of them and all this. And of course, if anybody wanted that and really wanted it, they would have brought their own darn money and made sure it was zoned for said thing that they desire. So there's strong opinions in the community. And of course, they don't understand what we have to work with on that. So given the fact that nobody wants McDonald's right now, even though it's coming, we need to discuss what we don't want to see along 410. So I'll just open it like that. And this is in line with the comp plan that is continually being updated. Councilmember Burgess.
I would like to see more restaurants or grocery store or something that can generate income for the city. I don't want to see another, even though I know that Illumina place is probably a great place. I would prefer not to see something that looks like that along 410. I mean, most people just drive through, so this is what they see of our city, and I want them to see something that they want to participate in. So that would be I want something that's gonna make money for the city. I'm glad McDonald's is coming. I think it will be a good moneymaker for us.
All times I want some charity.
Yeah. Maybe somebody wants a Happy Meal, even if they're too old.
And remember, again, it's about the zoning. I mean, how is it zoned? Is the way it's zoned that a restaurant can come in along 410? I know that we've seen, or there's on the city's website under public notice, there's an application for Mulligan's. I believe it's like a golf simulation thing. They're gonna have some type of food and beverage type deal in the business park. Recently, the Lost Woods Brewery just closed. And so it was obviously zoned appropriate for that to be there. I don't know if, doubt they had food or anything. Yeah, they closed. So we gotta talk about zoning. Where do we wanna see things at? And where do we wanna open up zoning to have the things that we wanna have? And what does that look like in light of our current zoning?
Car dealership would be nice.
Mayor,
Can you tell us, just so we don't get too far down the road, do we have anything in the hopper on the commercial side other than McDonald's? Because I know one of the things one thing we should discuss is storage units. That's been
And it might be, it might be easier to start with the list of things we don't want, and then where I'm going with what we do want is specifically how can we incentivize those businesses? For example, a grocery store. So I received information that a grocery store typically needs a minimum of 8 acres in order for it to be really successful, because it's not the grocery store itself that brings in the sales tax for a community, right? You get relatively low sales tax for groceries. It's all of the businesses that are located around it. Here in Buckley, we have very limited spots where that could potentially go. But they might make an exception if we were to do something like waiving their traffic impact fees or waiving their development review fees, which we can choose to do for those types of uses that we really want to attract into the city. And then we could even take it a step further and market for that. Or let's say that we wanted a grocery store or some property to go into the area kind of across the street from where McDonald's is going into, or a fast food restaurant. We could specifically say that we will waive tip fees or waive fees for this type of use to be located in this place and make it more marketable. So tying that into economic development, what we do have right now in the pike that I know of is potentially the Seattle boat storage, though that project has gone a bit dormant. They have had permitting come through, but I do not think that they've moved forward, and we may see some turnover on that property. We have not gotten any building permits from them. Their permit is vested for a lengthy period of time. It's land use permits. They're good for 5 years, but we haven't seen any additional activity since that happened. Beyond that, for nothing adjacent to 410 aside from Robertson Landing, which was approved, and that is a mixed use commercial as well as restaurant, proposed use, possibly healthcare clinic. It's shell commercial buildings. And then, yeah, we just had I always forget their name. The jugs, no. Gurgle Pot went in. So it's
What is it?
they're pitchers. They're pitchers that look like fish, and when you pour out the water, it makes a gurgle noise. And so their warehouse is here, but they have also indicated that they're going to use a bit of commercial space. We had a pre-application with O'Reilly's. They're trying to evaluate some options here. So those have been pre-applications, but nothing that has actually come out for permitting aside from McDonald's, a lot of residential, and the Mulligan's project.
Okay, so as far as storage units, there's one that could be grandfathered in, but other than that, we could
We
say.
could say no storage units along 410. We could create a zoning district just along the parcels that front 410 and say no storage units are allowed in that zone. Absolutely.
You can say no storage units, no construction drop spots,
No warehouses.
no warehouses, peak 410. No, we don't, we could say that because they're not in the pipe. Nobody's approached that. We could do that now. Or not. We just,
You can say we don't want commercial with residential above. We don't want anything more than 3 stories. Which some of that we already
Yeah,
have.
we have a lot of.
But this is a big
but
conversation.
you might like that someplace else, like
Yeah.
downtown.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So right now, we've created the future land use map, which you've all seen to create a little bit more flexibility in terms of corridor mixed use is how we've called out this entire land use designation. And now taking things one step further for economic development, we need to create some specific incentives if we would like to, right, for the grocery store, the bank, the pharmacy, and any others that you would like to have added in that list. And then we will be putting together a zoning map proposal that with a revised land use table that says what uses are and are not allowed. That will come after we adopt the comp plan, but I want to make sure that as we're developing this, because it on the backside, it's happening concurrently for staff. We're capturing whatever it is that you guys want to see out along 410 and elsewhere in the city. If you feel passionately about that, I just hear a lot more about 410.
We need to look at 112 too,
Mhm.
on what's going on in 112. Because most of it's storage. Or I don't even know if some of the companies are even in business anymore, like the welding shop. Are they still there? I never see a vehicle there or anything when I go past there. But we need to get something so it kind of cleans up. I mean, the only really nice spot there is what is that, Johansson's? Yeah, it's only nice.
And they're expanding. They already expanded, yeah.
But I mean, their main building and their yard looks nice. And then you've got like a bad neighbor moved in and a lot of the rest of it, so 112 needs a good stern, and I realize across the street from those, we only own only a little bit of that's in the city, but most of that's residential over there. But we still need to kind of look at that too, because you never know when somebody's going to sell. And we don't need a bunch of apartments in there and nothing else, because we need businesses kind of in those 2 areas.
I want to touch on that a little bit. So you open your packet and go to page 26, where we have our future land use map. When we've talked about our housing allocation and how now at the state level, we're required to have a certain amount of our housing be lower income. Where the areas that we've discussed amongst staff, and I believe briefly in front of council, but not probably too directly, is to have those units that we currently do not have, so that gap in affordable housing units off of 112 as depicted on this map in the yellow sections. The other area that we're looking, so this would be a special land use zone that would be an overlay for the yellow section. So we're going to have multiple colors that fall into this yellow section of housing zones, one of which would allow for a much higher density of housing units. And we're proposing that would go off of 112 and in the small sliver off of River, where we already see some multifamily, assuming that when those redevelop, they would redevelop at a slightly higher density. So you were talking specifically about 112.
Yes.
Does that, looking at the map, are you okay with those areas?
Yeah, but I don't see anything for parks or anything else on there.
They would have to, so part of that for our design criteria, again, we need to amp up our multifamily design guidelines a bit to include more open space. Other cities do a lot more than we do, and
Yeah.
that's something
Yeah,
else that
it's
we can
kind of like
amend.
shove all the houses in and then there's no place for the kids to play,
Yeah.
or even for the adults to go sit out and
Mhm.
watch the kids or just
Yeah.
enjoy themselves.
Park Desert.
So you're talking about townhouses and that along that area?
It would be a bit more dense than this would be our 3 stories. If we were to have 3 stories, our higher density
Thought we weren't
units.
allowed 3 stories.
We are allowed 3 stories. We're 35 feet is our max. So if they can make 3 stories work in 35 feet, they can bring us the design and
That's
they
gonna
can have
be
it.
short.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that looks good because
Okay.
you need to do something with that land out there.
Mhm.
But I don't want to see a bunch of construction stuff or all that going out there.
Yeah, and we need to have these units located somewhere. So
Yeah.
those seem like natural fits for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So going back to the list of things we want, we know restaurants, grocery stores, car dealerships, we could get creative and have something that essentially attaches sales tax generating businesses or high retail generating businesses and do some type of an economic development incentive for that. Using different business codes. I could look into that as a possibility if that's something you're interested in, or if you're wanting to only offer economic development incentives for a short list than the ones that I've heard recurring grocery store, pharmacy thing. Anything else that we want added to that list?
Councilmember Rosano.
Whatever brings the most money to town, right?
Yeah.
So that's car dealerships.
Careful.
Yeah.
More pot stores.
Yeah.
That's already taken care of.
Those don't, so yeah, so car dealerships or, okay, car dealerships and RV dealerships that are well designed, they are the biggest revenue generators for sales tax. I mean, you think about the cost of
Yeah.
a single vehicle or a boat or an RV, I think an RV place out here would be, it would fit perfect with the community, and those are very high sales.
How about a tractor dealership?
Sure.
That would be,
Okay, I'll see
Those
how
are
I
high
can
priced.
get creative and combining those types of uses for some type of an incentive. So we're not necessarily waiving maybe all of the fees like we would for a grocery store, but something to try to show them that we're open for business and want them here. Fast food?
fast food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Some proposal at one point, east of the Eagles for a car dealership. And there was an issue about having the building fronting on 410 and whether it was design review and all that. So not only maybe impact fees, but that design review can play into it about whether it has to abut the right of way or whether it doesn't, and whether design review district applies, that comes into it, whether their business can fit in that spot. So I remember that came
Yeah.
up, it was a zoning type issue. Not the zoning itself, but the requirements within the zoning that, it didn't get very far, we had a pre-app, but that's a kind of an open spot, kind of on the, it's on the west side of Chamberlain. No, where
Where the surface was.
yeah, where it's working for.
That's nice.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about, like if a grocery store goes in there, one of their objections might be getting in and out onto 410, coming back into Buckley. So unless we can figure out where they could go and back route into Buckley, that might, they might go,
Yeah, we
we
need full
can't get our trucks in and out, we can't get our customers in and out safely.
full
So,
movement on 410.
Yeah.
Mhm. Center Terminal.
Well, that's no different than going to Blue Max Monday, well, any day, they're closed on Sunday, so. Monday through Saturday or Rainier Fresh. If you're come back into town, you're fine. If you're going out to the west, you're gonna sit there because that's just the way it is.
well, yeah, but you can take 112. might
You
hit-
could,
You
you
might hit a
could,
few potholes going.
you could.
But you can dodge those.
And that's the trade-off. The state went and every time the lights.
Not our fault.
Okay. Okay, so we like the idea of high retail taxes and some type of an incentive for that. No warehouses, no storage.
No more coffee stands.
Yeah, no.
They bring in sales tax, I mean, yeah.
There is
Starbucks.
Buckley Gas and Coffee that's
Oh, that's.
been around for a while, which is right there next to Platt Electric.
Oh,
Those are
on
the
that
same
side, well,
owners.
that'll
On
be
that
nice to
side,
the people
yep.
that come in this way, they can actually.
Yeah,
stop
same
talking.
owners that have the grocery convenience store that on the city owned property currently.
Oh,
leasing
yeah.
out From the city,
Mm.
so same owners, yeah, garage that are,
Garage.
have already been through the land use permitting for that as well.
That.
Mhm. Okay, it's good feedback. Anything else before we move on? Okay. So for economic development, no change from when you last saw it. I'll take this feedback and we'll see how we can update some policies and clearly identify the types of uses that we're wanting to promote specifically along 410. Our previous economic development chapter, to speak a little bit to what Don was saying regarding design review criteria, is going away. So we will be updating our design review criteria separately, but right now, all that lives in our economic development chapter for our comp plan, more or less, is design review criteria. And that should really be adopted separately, not something that is our economic development policies and procedures. It's restrictions or, rules that they have to abide by, not a welcoming, we're open for business and want to have these types of businesses here. So we'll be doing a total rewrite, which you have before you, compared to what we have today. Capital facilities, this is the first time you're seeing it. It needs a bit of work, so please don't get too hung up on some of the language. We do have the proposed urban growth area cited here, and we have a significant data dump of all of our capital improvement plans for all of our utilities, public facilities, as well as staffing levels throughout the organization, listed here with updated deliverable dates based off of what we know to be true today. This will also likely change in the next couple of months before we have our final version that's going to be before you for adoption. It could be extended, so we would appreciate if you would take a look at this, specifically the transportation sections, and if there's anything we're missing, projects that we're missing, areas that are missing. One that we already know we're missing, but we will add is everything that comes out of that sidewalk and ADA study that was already approved. So those missing connections, if you will, between sidewalks that exist today and all of the development that's happening. So we can use grant funding or development fees to pay for those projects in the future. So those aren't reflected here yet, but they will be sidewalks specifically. But if there's anything related to roads or other transportation projects, multimodal types of transportation, if you all of a sudden want to require bike lanes throughout different areas of the city, for example, now is the time to have those discussions so that we can change the comp plan to reflect that. The other area to look at, just more of an FYI, page 91, I asked all of the department directors to look at our current population versus our anticipated population in 2044, which is 8,300 people, I think. Yeah, about 8,300 people. So we just received our population estimates from the Department of Commerce last week, and they're saying right now we're at 5,700 and some change. So we're looking at a just under $3,000 population increase, or 3,000 people,
Yeah.
$3,000 people population increase. They cost a lot more than that. Yeah, and so based off of that, our anticipated staffing levels in what would be 2044. I will just say that we have a lot of projects currently in development. I think we will exceed our population targets long before 2044. But in terms of what we will be using to plan for the future and budget for the future for staff, this is a good starting point. And please take a look. And if you have questions, we can have directors come and justify and explain why they think they need to be at those rates and levels. We also included what that would require for the facilities needs. And this is operating under the assumption that City Hall gets built. So if City Hall doesn't get built, there will be some additional things that are added to this list for facility upgrades. Then we created some goals and policies borrowed from other jurisdictions and created some of our own. Our goal right now is to just comply with the Growth Management Act and get our comp plan certified so we can continue to be competitive for transportation dollars. But with that, we would like to make it as Buckley focused and reflect our policies and priorities as we can. So any feedback you have is always welcome. That's all I have.
Questions or comments from council on this comprehensive plan update and what we need to do? There's some, Councilmember Burbank.
What would be an example of the sidewalks not continued, like?
One that's already being addressed, but is an easy example because I've heard about it a lot. It would be the area between Perkins Prairie and
C Street.
yeah.
C Street.
Oh, does it? Okay. So just like stop.
There's just missing links, yeah.
Okay.
And we have dollars that developers have paid in impact fees that we can use to help fund those projects to create sidewalks throughout the city.
Okay.
We can't maintain them using that same fund. But we can plan for the maintenance as well as part of the comp plan.
Okay.
There's missing link on Collins too, from like Sargent Street down to almost McNeely.
All the way,
can
yeah.
already do that.
Almost to McNeely, yeah.
Okay.
There's one little
There is.
section. There's a gray house that has a section, but
It's Hubbles. I don't know the address off the top of my head, but
right in that area.
How about when, and thank you for fixing the road by the fire station, except when they did, it's, road's now up above the sidewalk.
I think it's always been above the sidewalk.
I don't think so. But that needs to be taken care of too, because why bother to have sidewalk, can't use it.
Yeah, we have quite a few places throughout the city where the sidewalks were put in
Yeah.
a long time ago and,
Yeah.
and really low.
Yeah.
Do we have a plan to put a bike trail around Collins and Lebec and?
That was part
Right.
of the pros plan, which will also be adopted here. And some of those projects, the park projects, hopefully all of them are.
That would be
here.
nice. There's a lot of,
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
lot of
A
bikes.
lot of bikes.
Yeah, Collins Road Trail Access, I think that actually the one that was, I think that was actually the one that goes through the state property. But we'll look to make sure there was a proposed trail system that, yeah, went all the way around the tree when they moved the proposed trail.
And then an extension going out, possibly out onto that peninsula.
Yeah.
Behind your place out
Mhm.
there.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing seeing none, we will go down to item C, council member comments around the board. If there's any regarding this study session? Hearing seen none. It is 6:46 PM. We will end the study session. Members on Zoom, we are ending this meeting and we will be restarting the council meeting in about 10 minutes. You'll need to log out of the study session Zoom address and into the council meeting Zoom address. Again, 10 minutes for those on Zoom. We're adjourned for 10.